All right, so I think where everything's at now, the right next step is going to be to get back into building out that brain system. Um, if I go to combat code, so a little bit of the brain system is just sitting here working. The default brain. And what they should do is go into combat. So the parts of the brain system I need to build out, I'm going to skip this part. Rule, fight, fight. If we're in the fight state, then we should be running the old brain default for a party. That's what the brain default used to mean. Does that work? Brain script state. Yeah, so this should look like this. Okay, so this builds. And then what happens if I run? Infinite loop still? Makes sense, because presumably nobody's calling you. So now I need, yeah, here. We're gonna need to set up, I think the reason this hasn't been done is because it's just gonna be a bit of work to set up a way to construct the output. I think this is gonna end up having to be something like RPG move set moves bake. What is that? Yes, we have a move set system already, so that goes into the arena there and takes the loose. So then we can get a loose one started. Yeah. So we're gonna look through this set for each character. So I want to split it up first and then pick. I feel like that's the way to do it. Um, I think that this isn't necessary. I think that when you're in a state that involves picking a subset, that we don't dispatch on the state first, right? So when it was a pick one, the way we wanted to structure it was we go into the default brain by the current state. But I think when it's a pick subset, that's always going to be in the language of tiles. So I think we want to skip this idea, or rather, we want to skip that version of it and just go straight into this and delete this, right? It's like that on the character level now instead of on the party level. Okay, Maria's got a cool question, and it is a little unrelated to what I'm doing today, but it does tie to what I've been doing for the first 3 days this week. And the question is, well, the let me just read it. It's not, the first part's not a question. I've been working on a little roguelike game, and I want to hear your thoughts on association of assets with things in a game and or the management of those assets. Right now I'm doing the very simple thing of just manually specifying asset association, but this seems limiting for later proc gen. What direction would you explore for this problem? Okay, so it's a good question. I think basically what it comes down to is so you need an asset metadata language to deal with, right? So the very simple thing, when you say you're doing a very simple thing, I imagine that it looks something like this. You're like, I've got my sprites, and then I've got like player, and I got my sprite, you know, the sewer rat, and the wall, and the floor, and whatever, right? You've got sprites like this, and then somewhere else. So this is somewhere. This is somewhere else. You are in the middle of some executable code now, right? And you arrive at a spot where you're like asset link sprite player player.png sewer rat.png wall.png floor.png. So this is, I imagine, what is meant by the simplest approach, where you create asset codes manually, and usually what you would do is you'd have like a special mode here. You create some asset codes, and then you maybe these are not called asset link, but like sprite link or whatever. And then somewhere you have to link these to these. And then there's more to the system. Somewhere else again, we have to look at where these codes finally actually become relevant. There's like draw sprite, and then you've got sprite player, player.x, player.y, and you've got I is less than rat count, I plus equals 1. You have, this isn't actually what you render, how you render a game. Usually what you would have here is something more like, you know, entity, sprite, entity at y, entity x, some kind of generic system like this, right? But then somewhere else again, that gets linked through some construction code, right? So this is deep in the heart of your engine where you've got an entity language for describing how things behave once they're set up. But then somewhere else you have something that's like entity make player or something like this, right? Who knows how you decide to do it, but you do something like entity equals make entity xy entity sprite equals sprite player whatever else, right? Who knows? So this is how things sometimes happen. You have like special constructors for different things, etc., etc., etc. So if I'm understanding correctly, this is about how all of this stuff generally fits together, right? You have some assets, and ultimately the plumbing problem is you want code bindable names. So enums work. These are names which you can bind in code, and that name can then be referenced to link in the asset name, right? And it can be referenced again to link runtime simulation data to that asset. So this is sort of a binding code, and it's binding the entity is constructed by this with this through this, right? And then ultimately we want some kind of generic language where we can use those things. This isn't referencing any of the asset setup stuff, but this is what it ultimately boils down to, is you've got a code and it grabs the right data because that code was filled in with this name. The way we got it all to line up was by making sure that they all had the right name matches from there to there to there, right? So first of all, I don't think that you want to think ahead too far, because this isn't going to get in the way during ProcGen, but there are things out this that can feel like they suck, right? So this might feel like it sucks because you have to modify the code to add new assets, right? Anytime you are like adding in a new character or a new skill or anything else, you're going to make your sprite and then you're going to add in a code here. And so now it's not good enough to just drop a sprite in, you're also modifying the code to give it a name, and then you're linking it, and then you can use it. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. That might feel like the wrong thing to do, but that is about as sophisticated as it needs to get for a very long time. Now, if you were going to transcend that, if you're going to go beyond having to modify the code to put in assets, then what would that mean? Well, it would mean that this code has to go too. Right, this would have to go, because if you're going to get to a point where you don't maintain this fixed set of names, then this code wouldn't be writable. So then you're going to have to start not only managing your list of assets and the asset metadata, but also somehow you're going to have to write your gameplay code outside of code too. Like you might have to start doing something like saying, okay, I want get asset player or whatever. Now it's like a runtime resolved or something, right? You've eliminated the need for compile time binding, but you've replaced it with the need for this runtime resolution. And I don't think, like, that might seem like the right idea for ProcGen, but this is putting it in preemptively. What'll happen instead is at some point, here's what is realistic and annoying about ProcGen, okay? When you get to a certain point, you might be looking at this and going, okay, having one floor tile isn't really cutting it. I'm actually going to have, like all of these mixed together. And now this starts to feel like a new kind of problem, because you're manually binding this list here, which if that was it would be probably fine. But then somewhere else you're probably going to do something like make a sprite group called sprite group floor, and you're going to say it has 5 elements, and then you're going to write sprite floor 1, sprite floor 2. Maybe this is something where you can do sprite floor 1 and then 5, and it gets the idea of how to generate the next ones, like you're guaranteeing they're in order, maybe something like that, right? So that's where you'll start to feel it come apart, and what's happening there is once you've actually got to the point of production where you want these kinds of things, you no longer want each asset to be manipulated through a special name necessarily, right? You get to the point where you have assets that you want to bind in somehow, but you don't necessarily care to bind them in with a unique name. So what you could start doing is you could start doing tricks, like get fancy and say, well, okay, if my goal here, if my workflow goal is that I don't have to do this, then, well, for one thing, this is, a pattern. I could say that there's such a thing as like, dropping in groups like this, so you could play with it this way and say, this is really what I want to specify. Or you could say that it's going to be driven off of, how do I want to put this? You could spell it out still, like you still want to manually maintain the list because whatever reason, maybe it's not always going to be consistent 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It hasn't become an issue yet, or the patterns aren't regular enough, or you're trying to work out a new pattern. So then what you can do is, instead of having to link each sprite, you could say like, well, whenever I put in 0, that just means load the thing in, right? Now, why would you want to load it in if you can't do anything with it here? Well, I'm going to propose that maybe what you can do is to like think of it as trying to bind things like this. So you're going to want to, one way or another, come up with a more sophisticated data structure, right? I mean, here you can see how it could even be %u with an I and a loop, right? So now you don't need a pattern expansion trick inside your API. You just expand it manually like this. Right? But what's happening here, the important thing that's happening isn't that you're getting outside of the process of changing the code to structure the asset import. What is changing is that your asset data is being put into a more sophisticated metadata structure. So think of this as the most simple metadata structure you can have. It's an array, and each thing has an index. But a lot of times, what you're going to start wanting is to have stuff that's like grouped or set up into like 9-piece tile arrangements, like symmetry grid things. So you want to classify each element, and so you'll start binding the raw assets to more rich types of handles and data structures for accessing them, right? And then when you're doing procgen, the advantage to doing all of this over writing it out like this is that you've put into the same code that's loading in each file, you're also putting in the concept of how they're structured. Now, that's just like how I would think about it. It might come to a point where maintaining this metadata somewhere else is useful, but you're still going to come back to a problem that you need these handles in your code, right? So this is the part not to get hung up on. I think it's easy to get hung up on the fact that it feels odd that you're making a game, but you have to modify the code. Like the art in the game is somehow touching the code. Why is the code so aware of what art is in the game? And the reason, again, is that you end up needing these handles to write in your code. Unless you got to the point where you had a game engine where you could lift the game logic up out of the low-level language and onto some kind of constructed interface on top of all that. If you look at something like a game engine like GameMaker, you don't have this feeling when you're using GameMaker because you create sprites, and then the editor itself for the scripts of the game automatically know to treat the names of the sprites as keywords for you, right? That's what the game engine stuff does for you. But when you're putting it together by yourself, sooner or later, even if you don't handwrite it, you're going to have, you can have your own, you could do a metadata approach. And you could be like, okay, player is going to come in from player.png, and the floor is going to be a group made up of floor %u.png 1 through 5 or something like that. I don't know what notation you want to come up with for your system. So once you have this metadata, what would you do with it? Well, you would turn it into meta-generated enums. Like, you still end up needing this binding point in your code. This is what I wanted to arrive at. So hopefully that helps. I think the biggest thing I want to say is I personally don't bother trying to write my games where the code doesn't know about the assets. That seems like the kind of thing that is easy to believe is how it should be done, but it's close to impossible unless you're willing to make a new kind of programming system, or if you're willing to always resolve your assets by some kind of runtime thing, right? If you have metadata like this, and then you're doing get asset player, well, this is obviously going to work. It's just not, now you don't have the nice statically resolved asset system, right? Now, maybe you want that. Maybe you want that because you can make plugins to your game. Like, you can mod your game better if you can query for assets. Like, new assets can just get dropped into the asset set. But even then, the code that has been written to query those assets still has a fixed set of names that it can query. So I really don't know how you get around this. I think that it's probably better to think of it like you don't start writing a new text editor and try to figure out how to make yourself independent from the ASCII table and the UTF-8 table. You don't go, well, these are just some arbitrary bindings of statically known codes to specific ideas, but I don't want that assumption baked into the code. You could do the same thing with your assets in a game. The assets in the game are like the icons of the visual language of your game, and they need codes, so you have to maintain a code table for them. Hopefully that's helpful. If there are any follow-up questions, I'm happy to answer, but I think that's most of what I have to say on how to architect it. Another layer at which it could resolve itself is if you also have metadata for entity types. So if you have, like, you have assets, and you're like sprite player is player PNG, and then later you have entities, and you're like, you have player, you have sewer rat, whatever, and then you have entities, entity sewer rat, and then maybe you want to be like sprite sewer rat stats 3.1 or whatever. Okay. Okay, yes, all of this is about to change because what I'm thinking we're gonna do now is go through these brain to-dos because I think that that'll kind of work, but it's gonna fail to use moves that are. It's also crashing still. It's gonna fail to use moves that are not on the player's tile board, but that are available to the player or to the character. Okay, so our character is null. How did that happen? I guess this entity probably didn't get set up because I didn't call. Okay. Hmm. Okay, that looks like an infinite loop, which is better. Let's see if we can observe this getting called. All right, so we're doing pick subset. Presumably I reach this point sooner or later when I reach a tile with a brain in it. And so now I want to see, okay, you're using the attack tile. We have one, the counter is not 0, so you can use it. Now, does it move kind of flags? Yeah, so this might be something you can use. Can you use this move? Actions, quick actions. This is hard-coded, this will have to change, but if this is not 0 and the count is greater than 0, then you can use this. Surely that gets hit once in a while. No, it doesn't, because I haven't decided how I actually want move limits to work yet. That's what we're hitting next. Okay. So this here is trying to say how many moves you can have, and it gets passed right here. That might just mean that these characters are each being assigned one, like right now the way I was doing this up until this passive rewrite was that I was putting a tile on each character and using those tiles, right, a quick action tile and an action tile, and just using them as counters. Part of the idea of the tile is that it's like a variable that I can just attach to a character, or to any thing that takes a tile. And so I could just say, okay, you each get one, and then the way that the use move logic works, which is in the other one. You know what I'm gonna do? This is bugging me. I'm just gonna drop all this in here because they get so interconnected and interdependent without me noticing that the distinction is clearly bogus. Okay. Um, so now it's infinite looping, but what is it infinite looping on? Is it... Yeah, I want to get off of having to do that for sure. Maybe next week, I think next week I'll do a cleanup week. We'll just work on the data structures and the naming and organization for a week, because it has definitely gone to the point of being highly neglected again. The root bot brain for pick one. Yeah, that's fine. Okay, so we're here in this state. I want to basically see... Here we go into a fight state. Oh, I guess I know what's happening. It's coming here. It's running a brain. Eventually, it runs a brain that would run the attack tile, but our counters are all 0. So when we get this far, we fail to actually use the move. Okay. Now, how we got there, I want to look through this here, see if I think this makes sense. The rule is, in a fight, everyone makes their decision at the same time. We are currently trying to resolve everyone's decisions. Each player is going through the bot brain, so they're making their decision in code right here. The character goes, and then it looks at the tile brains, which then call this. So this is all more complicated than it needs to be, because what we're really going to do from now on, so when this happens, we are just going to look at the move set, right? The move set is right here. We're going to either we'll partition them ahead of time, or we will gather out, we'll split the moves for that character from this set. We can work on the data structure for the move set so that this doesn't have to be such a problem. But we'll say, okay, grab stuff based on character and narrow down to that view. Then we can do all of them. So shuffle them with a partial order constraint and run them. That's what this logic is going to become until all the counters are set to 0. Then the only question is, how does the counter from here get into play? And it could be that these are going to be just tile counters. So whenever we're iterating all these characters, whenever we're iterating all the characters, we're going to set their counters up here. Maybe we'll set them all up first, and then we have to run an event for new moves. So, I don't know. The limit here is a little tough. I think this is the wrong call. I think I should set tile counters before this. because the decision should not include the setting up of the counters, which also includes the running of certain effects sometimes. So I think I need to separate that. There's the initialize the counters, and then there's the events that update the counters before the turn decisions get made. Then there's the decisions, and then all of this could get skipped. We would be running the brain for attack still. It would say that it wants to use attack. And so all that would have to happen is we would go... We already know this is in the move set. So from the perspective of what the brain needs to accomplish, it just needs to emit the choice to use the move. I don't think it should be doing the tile checking at all. This needs to be pulled into... Use needs to get pulled out is what needs to happen, right? So when we say use from a brain script, we're not saying use it in the actual game. We're saying the brain has chosen to use it, but then outside the brain, they're going to be... they're going to be shuffled, going through a shuffle and run moves. And whenever we run a move, we're going to see if it's valid and ditch it maybe first. Trying to think of the best way to do it. So in theory, what should happen is the counter limits should be enforced by the rules of the game, but they don't necessarily need to be enforced super literally. So if we're going to say get back this set of moves and everything in here is going to get split out and then run one at a time, we can always just skip over moves that are illegal, and that enforces it. And that includes skipping over ones that you don't have the moves for. And then, of course, the interfaces for humans will actually usefully indicate the limit and make it obvious that they should count on only getting to use 2 of these moves, right? Okay. Okay. So let's start from the use part. Okay, I think all of this is gonna go. Okay, so then, what's happening with the shuffle and run moves part? Unpack the move. Technically, bot running at full speed would be... What is the minimum work I want the bot to have to do? It arrives at the decision, shuffles, runs each brain, each tile brain script in the shuffled order. Some of those tile brain scripts will check the status and be like, given what's happening, I don't want to do this move, and so then they won't actually use it. But then some of them will get used, and whatever order they come out in is the order they get played in, so whichever one comes first wins. If the move that you said you want to use isn't in the original set, how would I find out? The only way I can think of is that before I do all this, probably what I should do, I think the best way to do this is going to be so we'll just say validation really should be happening before we return anything from a decision. So this check here, this check here won't be relevant because this will have already come into effect in validating the move before we got here. Same thing with this check. It had to be doable to reach this point. Now this part is significant. I guess it's just going to work exactly like this at this level. So if you can actually use this, because you haven't used too many, we could probably even go so far as to say that the move set validation would include checking the counts. Character tile deck. So we decrease, yeah, we've got more than once. We decrease that so we know we're keeping track. And then we do this. I think we could get to the point where this doesn't have to happen. I think what I'm thinking is validation could even include checking this so that shuffle and run moves would just boil back down to grabbing the move and running it. Right? But for now, we can put the rule enforcement in there for the counters. Okay. Now, finally, this pick subset thing isn't really going to work. See ya, Maria. Thanks for coming to hang out. All right, so Okay, it should not be able to run all of these. But even more weird than that, once it's done running them, if it does this, this should be... Yeah, that's setting way down to 0, so that should be getting dead. So now the question is, why aren't we getting any dead parties, right? This should definitely be one. Child count is 4. Oh, do we not check and remove anyone? Okay. Okay, if the heart amount is equal to 0, so a part of this that's hard to work out is, I guess, yeah, so I guess the game rule I had before is going to get modified. So one way I could structure things, right, one way to structure the game is to make all of the rules apply simultaneously, and therefore characters who are active, they make a decision, and their move gets played, and then some of them get knocked out by the results of resolving all those, but all the resolves happen, and the character getting knocked out during a turn doesn't invalidate them doing a move, right? Now, that would be fair enough to implement. I would just take this set of moves that I've got here, run them all. The order is shuffled so that if order does matter, that can be resolved, but we will insist that elimination of characters isn't applied until later. But the problem is that the move set is already encoded ahead of time, referring to a character. So if that character gets knocked out here, but then I run shuffle and run moves on another part of the moves, right? If I've got quick actions and then attacks, and the quick actions included something that caused one of the characters to be knocked out, but then that character has a move that gets played during the actions phase, well, that character's move shouldn't happen if they are applied at separate times, right? Once the resolve has occurred, the character should be out of play. Now, the alternative is to say that after every character move is applied, there's an easy way to do it, which is just check, right? Here I'm removing characters once they have 0 HP, but here I could be doing, hey, if you're going to run a move for a character, HP has to be greater than 0 first as a prerequisite, right? The problem with that is now, if I get shuffled to the end of a list, but I'm applied at the same time, my move doesn't happen anymore. And that's built in. So the question is, do I want it to work that way or not? That's what it basically comes down to. If I don't do it this way, then I need some other way to say, hey, after a character gets knocked out, there's a moment here where we mark a character as knocked out. What if we... And this is not when they go to 0, but after they've gone to 0, right? After the whole resolve, which could happen in multiple orders, they stay up until the end of the resolve, and then they go down. And that's not just to... that's not just an iteration problem. In fact, I'm not iterating characters up here. Down here, I'm iterating characters, and so I have to remove them carefully by looking at the next one ahead of time. But I'm not just removing them so that the child count will be correct. I also want to remove them so that they won't be able to run this, and that isn't a part of it. I guess the best thing I could do is use a tree operator. I think I have like attach. Yeah, sim entity detach. Just detach that character if it has a health of 0. And then from now on, when we go to, this is good. When we go to run a character move, if that character's parent does not equal 0, it still has a party, and so it's still in. Once it's knocked out, it gets detached from a party, and so it won't be allowed to move. This is a little like preemptive, just getting it working. That might evolve over time. I might move knocked out characters into a different group so their parent wouldn't be null. It would just be something other than a party. It could be called the graveyard or something. I don't know what the simulation for the specific game would be. combat, fight, combat, fight, combat, fight, combat, fight, combat, fight, combat, fight. Took a lot of rounds. Who's fighting this? Sim. So this is the Sleepy Party versus the Goblin Party. That might make sense why it took so many rounds. Let's improve the logging further. So I log each state as it happens, but what also happens that I'm not including here? I could put a bit of logging in this. So every time I run a move, but I don't know how, like, I don't know which character and I don't know how to print the move, but this would be a good spot to log moves. All right, so it's funny that the 0 is still there. When does that happen? That happens during combat round, right? Combat round. We log the active parties. I think we just do this on every state, though. I could just go log there, run the hook, clear, log this active parties at the end, and go. So took 1 damage, took 2 damage. This guy took another damage. Why is he up? You know what I mean? Shouldn't this go? Okay. Oh, you know what? Yeah. The fight apply comes later. So to get this fully working, it's not just whenever we shuffle and run moves. All right, so 3 of my guys get hit. They all wake up. Then we go back and decide again. Do we want to... Okay, so what's cool about logging this way is that it just always applies, so you're able to see every step. I can see what the party's like ahead of time, and then what they're like at the end. Then it's always a repeat from here to here because of the fact that there's no change in the states of counters or tiles at all at the beginning of a combat round. And so it's a little bit verbose, but it's cool that it can just always all be there, no matter what. Like, you can't mistakenly lose some of the information that's part of the machine here. The sleepy party just barely survived that. But there we go. The simulation's running to completion again until one of the parties dies. And now we can tell which party dies by checking the states they're each associated with at the end. The party with 2 is the dead one. I'm running it over and over again because I think once in a while it's possible for the other team to win in this scenario. They just have to get lucky. There we go. There's a mutual KO. So what happened here? Only 2 guys woke up, and one of them got real low real fast. Then they kept going. This guy here. They must have both been attacking. So yeah, they don't really join the fight until they get hit, and then they've got 2 left. If this was working the way I would want, these guys could be using Wake Up here, and I wonder if they were to prefer Wake Up over Attack, if they would fare better, because then they would have taken the same amount of damage after, let's see, round 1, round 2. So they would have still been down to 3, and these guys wouldn't have taken any damage, but they'd be dealing 3 damage from then on. So that's 1, 2 damage output that they would have had in their advantage over the course of 2 rounds. That's 2 damage. And they would have given up 2 damage here. It maybe wouldn't have made any difference, but you can see how it could, right? Especially if these guys also had special skills you needed to count on, and they were the ones who were stuck asleep, right? So what should it be? What should I do? Well, I've been at it for a couple hours. This might be the right place to stop. We got the headline here is I got the simulation running again. We do use verification off the move set. Yeah, this works. Kind of, but there might be some follow-up that I want to write about. I'll make more notes soon. Yeah, we haven't done this yet. And I think I want to do... Yeah, there's some things that order of events that I haven't decided on what I want, but um, you know what? Let's skip that. That's sort of sophisticating the brain system beyond speculatively. I'm not quite ready to go there yet. Design a brain composition system, inheritance, mix, and likely a brain. So this is and then there's still this big thing that I haven't gotten to, which is thinking about what's going to happen when I want to play a move that does include targeting. And that also intersects with other issues of like, right now I can only play my moves like attack are scripted to refer to an enemy party, which is a part of why I can't make the jump to this thinking, because I have a very side one, side two understanding. So having three parties somehow involved doesn't work. When these guys want to do a hit, there's not one party for them to select, and I haven't decided what that means yet. But this is separately an issue that this is targeting against enemies, but if you're targeting against an ally, how would that work? It's hard coded into the code right now to select an enemy, so this clearly can't be used against an ally the way it's written. And you might want that for all kinds of reasons, including the mind control one, right? If I'm mind controlled by the enemy, then presumably they're going to use me to hit my friends if we're in combat. But how will they do that if I use which party I belong to determine how the move plays out? So I think this needs to be reimagined, and then targeting needs to become a part of the story from the ground up. But I think, like I said, I think this is a good place to stop for now. I guess the other thing I could do is try out the chase sequence, which I've been building towards this whole time. Maybe we are close enough to be able to do that now. So we have two parties, a sleepy party and a goblin party. If they both try to flee, well, for one thing, a sleepy party isn't allowed to use a move. So I think we would actually want to upgrade here. Nah, never mind. I was gonna say, like, maybe you shouldn't be able to choose flee if you're asleep, but really that just means you can say the party's gonna try to flee, but they have no ability to do so anyways. So whatever you choose here, the rules of the game are such that whatever you choose, you're a sitting duck. I guess, yeah, I have to be careful how this works, because there is something sort of like, if I choose flee and they choose chase, or if I flee and they fight, and so then they're chasing me, I would have to be careful that it doesn't become possible for them to do nothing and for me to somehow get away without waking up. That could be weird, right? That shouldn't be a possible story. So I want to watch out for that. This might need to be conditional in the future in more rich ways. I might want to be able to say, party one can fight or flee, and party two can only choose like okay because they're sleepy or something, and they don't have anyone who's awake. Something like that. Now, I'm going to just say everyone chooses to flee, though. And in that flee state, you're going to get to use your tiles. Do we have run tiles anywhere? Yes. So if you are fleeing, then you use your run tile. It's an quick action. It generates a certain amount of speed based on how fast you can run. And anyone can do it right now. Except the mushrooms. So we start in a combat round. We're all asleep. Both sides choose to flee. And so the goblins get away and my characters just stay asleep. Okay. That's cool. What happens if... Last one for now. What happens if we want to do... If PRNG role bounded context PRNG 3 is equal to 0, else... I don't get it. So there we get a combat. Here, we get that. How can that be? Explain? There we go. Character is null. so these are all null. That's wrong. How is that happening like that? Let's just take a look right here. Okay, yep, this is fine. 4 for that one, and then 3 for this one. So this just needs to get flipped. Set everyone's moves. Round begin. Get moves. Get... Okay. Get scratch. Pick subset. This right here. Are you grabbing a scratch erroneously? No. Unless this pop to... How big is that? 0. Well, that's... Duh. Pop amount, please. There we go. So, round 1, they fight. 3 of us get hit. We don't get to hit back. Round 2, we're ready to fight. Fight round. This is fight, flee. Why does it become 5, 6? That's weird. Oh, right. So the 4 becomes the 6 and they switch orders. Nice, okay. You can see that caused the switching orders here. So 4 mapped to 6. 4 mapped to 6, and so then when we sort those, these parties came out in the opposite order. Makes sense. 5, 6. Combat round. So what happened here? Why didn't these guys get away after 5, 6? Flee chase. They were doing the fleeing. I was doing the chasing. They generated runs, presumably. I guess this comes down to I can't see if any of them are using run. Also, none of them appear to actually have a run tile. Let's check in on that issue first. Excuse me. Where are those run tiles? Is run hidden? Unhide it for me for a minute. Because everyone's got a run tile. When one of you flees, I don't know who's running because I don't log moves, but what I'm gonna do is extend okay. Shuffle and run moves. Right here I say I want to log moves. I'm not going to go that far, but if the proto is equal to RPG tile run, actually, let's just look at speeds. I think that'll be better. Speed 0, speed 1, yep. So this just auto transitions to this. But why no speeds? It's weird, right? I want to see this happen. Why don't we see it happen? Weird. Surely we get at least this far. Grant moves, event round begin. Shuffle, 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 shuffle. Is that the issue? Does the run tile not have the right type? It's a quick action. So each one should be getting a quick action. Ah, this is the offender here. Waking someone up takes an action. Both sides generated a speed of 0. Now why is the next question. Well, our guys, party 1 here, are all asleep. But why is party 0 not generating some speed? The goblin party is just goblins. So they can all generate 1 speed, and the minimum speed of the whole party should be 1. What happens when we are gathering moves from gather, where is this? Gather moves equals, yeah, tile moves equals, where is this? Okay, combat has this, tile moves equals moves gather from tiles. This is the one I'm looking for. Thank you. Now, gather tiles recursive. If we see a tile, we ask if the tile can be used. How do we answer that question? The tile can be used if it is a, if the proto is actually a proto for a tile. That, because we Lego bricked the protos a long time ago. If there is a move kind on it, or if the state of the character matches the state of the tile. Now that doesn't work perfectly well when it comes time to do the new thing. Right here, which is to either flee or chase. Right? And so the issue is that the tile proto filtering doesn't work. This doesn't work. Instead, what has to happen is event code Okay. Alright, if we want to figure out if a tile can be used, what we have to do is go, okay, after seeing that it's a tile, and that it in fact does have a move kind, tiles which don't have move kinds are more like status effects or, you know, gold or hearts or something, counters. But tiles that have move kind can be used if the event and state of interest are correct. So what we're going to do is context probe code equals RPG event this used. It has to be able to do this. And tile probe, tile proto tile hook context. So we set up that we're trying to probe. If we succeed, then the context probe success gives us whether or not this tile can be used. Tile header state is out. So if we have the correct event, then we can return true and return the event stuff. If we're just probing, then we check if we would have returned true. If the probe code was the event, and return that value. Still not there. The ones doing the chasing are these guys. No, the fleeing are these guys. They should definitely be generating speeds, and they're not. So I'm gonna look at, first of all, just make sure everything's working. Go to this brain here. Turn off the random chance to run and just fight it out again. Make sure everything else is still working. Something else is busted. Okay, good to know. What happened? Combat. Flee chase. Combat round. Fight. Here we go. Set up all the characters. Grant all the moves. Events. Now we do moves. We get back a bunch. Attacks, none. Late attacks, quick actions, actions. A little bit suspicious here. Tile moves. Wake up is an action. When it is used, it does this trick. Very strange. Okay, alright, I don't know what to make of it yet. Why is it like that now? What happens here? Loose goes here, and then we go into the party. Eventually we are gonna find Proto can be used. Heart? No, the heart can't be used. So event on tile doesn't do anything. Next tile. This tile is run. Can it be used? Well, it's got the move flags. We're gonna probe. To see it's not like that, but we were doing a tile probe. Probe code, event code 4. Oh, they match, but the state codes must not have matched. Well, the party is null. Okay, how did we get this far? Tile can be used. Ah, we're calling this hook. We didn't set up this entity. Okay. 944. There we go. So now they duke it out to completion like before. Good. And if I turn on the ability to randomly run away sometimes, we get fight flee, which turns into flee chase. Both parties generate 0 speed, and nobody knows why. Okay, so we're still there. Oh, okay. I want to see the fight, or the flee chase state. I want to see what moves we end up gathering there. Go into a tile. The first tile we see is heart, and so we don't expect it to do anything. The next tile we see is run, and we ask, can it be used? It's got the flags to be used. We're going to probe it. Event code, set this up. Look at the hook. Probe code is for event code. So yeah, this is it, can be used. But what state do we get for that party? 5. And the state code we want is 5. So probe success is true. Return that. This one goes, it'll probably skip assigning the probe success, but totally successful overall. So run can be used and it gets pushed. It doesn't generate anything here. So gather moves now contains that. If we keep this up, I want to see each time that we save a move. What is the move that's getting saved here? Another run. Another run. 7 others just got dropped in. I assume we had a sleep tile get hit. Attack, quick action, action. Yeah, these all get iterated, but they do nothing. Run gets added. Attack, quick action, action, heart, run. Attack, quick action, action, heart, run. Attack, quick action, action. Okay, so after all of that, tile moves contains 11 moves, and some of them are run. There's one. There's one. There's one. There's one. There's 4 runs right there. 5. 6. There's a wake up. There's a wake up. There's a wake up. There's a wake up. And there's a run. Okay. So all of these that are open are the runs. 5, 6, 7. There are 7 total. That's enough for each character to have 1. These 3 are actions. Wake ups, and we shouldn't have the ability to use any of them, so that shouldn't matter at all. We come through here. All the characters should end up getting a quick action. Round begin. Now one of them lost their quick action because of that, so one of our characters cannot run. But if we go into shuffle and run right here, doesn't it seem like it should be what? So the move set contains some moves you can use. Then for each character, we go across all the moves. If they have a brain, so what kind of proto is this if it doesn't have a brain? Okay, I see. I just don't have a run brain. That's why run's not getting used. Okay, so they look at this. They get into combat. Player party decides they're gonna uh, flee, so they go to this state. But the NPC party says they're gonna fight, so that goes into a flee chase state here, with the player up top again, and they generate 0 speed because they're asleep. But these guys catch up. Now, this is why it doesn't make a lot of sense for these guys to be fleeing in the first place. But they catch up, and that means a round of combat happens immediately, like a fight state is immediately entered from there. Because basically these guys got overtaken by these guys. So they got overtaken, the fight happens. Back again, both sides choose to flee this time. And so it's exit. If I wanted to see them kind of behave a little more predictably, I could up the odds. So this means 1 out of 5 times they're gonna flee. So encounter begins, we say fight, the other guys say flee. We can't generate any speed, they get away, it's over. Fight, we wake up a couple guys by getting hit. Combat round. Fight again. We get absolutely annihilated in one go. Looks like these guys probably used their wake up ability to wake up these two and got killed. And then we went here again. These guys against these guys are kind of in trouble because they don't deal damage fast enough anymore. But the other party decides to flee. We keep up and we end up back at a combat round decision. Both parties decide to stand and fight. One of our guys gets knocked down again. And so does one of theirs this time. All right. You see right here during the fight, we knocked down one of theirs, they knocked down one of ours. Now it's 2v1. We take on another one of them. Blah, 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 blah. Ultimately, it looks like we've got player party KO on this setup. It's a little hard to tell if it's player party or the other party or the NPC party because the orders no longer indicate which party is which in the states, which might be a mistake. Maybe I should be storing them in order, storing them in a fixed order, and then just doing the mapping to the resolution and the passing to the handler, but the true state order is fixed or something. I'm not sure. That would also have to mean unswizzling all the go-tos back to their original order. I'm not sure if I want that. But here, the player party survived with 1 HP left on one guy. 3 of them got woke up on round 1. Fight. Okay, so now the player is trying to flee. Both sides generate the same amount of speed. They go back into fighting. Okay, cool. I mean, this looks like it's working. We're getting mostly player party victories, although we also get endings like one side getting away. Here our player party couldn't catch the goblins when they got away. So we get a different story every time. in terms of who lives and dies, and whether or not, you know, sometimes nobody dies. Sometimes it's dire straits at the end, and sometimes it ends very quickly. All depending on the chance of when the flee happens and a little bit of the luck of the how the fight plays out. Ooh, they beat each other down to nothing that time. It got away. We try to run, but they are just as fast as us, and so the fight continues, etc., etc. Okay, cool. I think that's about what I wanted. The chase system is actually working now. The minigame happens. It gets simulated. Okay. Default, you do the fight. Oh boy. Okay. Okay. I think that might be the right thing to do next, is to do a visit over the tile stuff. Maybe touch all the entity stuff again. I mean, I was saying clean up next week. Maybe cleanup starts tomorrow. I think we could do that stuff. Okay, cool. I think this is a good plan. It's a good place for me to stop. I'm yawning. I've been at it for 3 hours straight. It's been a long programming day. So I'm going to wrap it up here, and I will be back tomorrow to probably get started on a cleanup pass over RPG Simulator code. All right. With that, if you're here, thanks for coming and checking out what I'm doing, and I will see y'all around the internet.